Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I am your host. And in today's episode, I'm talking with Bec Bennett from Annan Homestead. Bec is another person who knew what she wanted to do real early on. So she was going to nurseries just to hang out basically before she was allowed to work there. And then as soon as she was able to work, she started working in a retail nursery and then went into a production nursery before finishing school as well. That was great hearing, that she wanted to get into the industry and is still in it today. So still loves what she does. She ended up starting her own business where she was doing landscape designs, and she talks about how she wasn't charging enough for the designs and how that's a common thing for people to do when they're starting out. And now she's in teaching, working at Chisolm, and that's one of the messages that she passes on to her students a lot is to know your worth when you're charging for designs. And speaking of her teaching, we talk about that a fair bit in this chat, and I found it fascinating hearing about the inner workings of the way that tapes work. So hopefully you enjoy this chat with Bec Bennett. Bec, thank you very much for joining us on the Landscaping Podcast. My first question for you is, how did you start in the industry?
Oh, in the industry, I got a job weeding and watering when I was 14 at my local wholesale and retail nursery up in Coffs Harbour.
All right. And so is that just because it was available, or did you know you wanted to get into horticulture?
That's what I wanted to do. Yeah. I had grown up gardening with mum, and my favorite weekend thing was either go to the botanical gardens or drop in at that nursery. And so as soon as I approached working age, it was like, give me a job.
Ah.
They already knew me.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, because it's good, and you can actually know what you want to do. Because a lot of people, when they finish school, they got no ideas, and then they'll go and waste time doing something else.
Yeah, I consider myself really lucky in that sort of regard. Well, in a lot of regards. But yeah, it's been very clear. I had a period of time when I moved from Castle Harbour down to Melbourne that I was like, oh, I don't really want to work outside. So I think Hort will just be like a little home, like just make my hobby and I'll do something else for a job. And it didn't last very long.
That because it's too cold in Melbourne compared to Coffs Harbour.
Yeah, Melbourne has a really bad rap when it comes to the weather, the cold, the rain, the unpredictability, and it was just like, oh, work outside in that? No.
Yeah. Yeah. Today, as we're recording this, it's bang on the middle of summer, and then we had 20 mil of rain this morning.
Yep.
So it's perfect to
Yeah.
work outside.
Yeah. I was very lucky. I remember back in high school, I was harassing my ag teacher to let us do ornamental horticulture so that I had, some sort of formal training before I went out into the sort of, left high school and that sort of thing. So yeah.
And so, how long did you work at that first nursery for?
I was there for a few years. Yeah, I did. So I was doing just weekend work there, and then I left there and took on more production nursery work while I was in my senior high school years. And I was able to work there actually during the school week. They let me take a day off a week and go and work, which looking back is like surprising.
Yeah.
I don't know how I managed to swing that, but I did. And then, yeah, I was there through my senior years and then moved on to a different production nursery. So, yeah, did a few nursery jobs while I was up in Coffs.
Yep. And when did you move to Melbourne?
I've been down here, I think it'll be 14 years this year. Yeah, so it's been a while, but I still consider Coffs home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you was working in production nurseries before moving down. So, and what made you move down here?
My love, I met my husband and he lived down here, so
Yep.
yeah. Very conveniently, a lot of my friends also moved down here for study and set up their lives. So there's been a big chunk of us that just
Perfect.
migrated.
Yeah, nice. And then did you start looking for work in production nurseries down here to start with?
I had a job lined up and I got down here and called them and I was like, I'm here. And they went, oh, no. And, oh, okay. And that's kind of when I was like, okay, out of the industry. And so I did a bit of tele research, which was the worst job ever. Do not recommend. And then I worked at a coffee roastery for a little while. And then while I was there, was like, nah, I need to get back into the industry. So I started studying while I was there, and then eventually moved on and did a little bit, like really little bit of time working for a landscaper, which was a shift for me. I was very much nursery. And then that all went bad. And so I ended up getting a job at Landscape Link, and I was there for a few years. I finished my studies there, and then I moved on. I was ready for more growing and stuff like that, but also wanted to do things for myself. So I did a year of being self-employed. In that time, I did nursery work, contracting for botanics, plant supply. I did 1 or 2 days a week going to all the different trade markets and taking care of different nursery stands for them, and doing kind of merchandising, I guess, and doing sort of soft landscaping and gardening jobs.
And
Did
what
that.
was when you say you were studying, what did you study?
I studied the very last intake that did the sustainable landscape design course through Swinburne, and I did my diploma of horticulture as well at Swinburne.
And when did you finish that? Well, like what was the reason for stopping the sustainable landscape design course?
Oh, I think that was kind of like, it was kind of the first course to be really specifically focused on sustainability. But as the courses changed, like courses or qualifications kind of get updated pretty frequently every few years. So as they were updating them, they were kind of embedding sustainability into everything anyway. So having a whole course just with that sort of aspect and perspective kind of became a little bit redundant, because it
Yeah,
was kind of going to be in everything anyway. That's what I heard was the reasoning.
yeah, it makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
And when you were working for the landscape, what sort of work were you doing there? Was it construction you were doing there?
Mostly just soft stuff. Yeah, he did a little bit of construction, but it was mostly planting out and a little bit of maintenance. That's where I learnt that I do not enjoy landscape maintenance.
Right.
Um, yeah, like irrigation systems, that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what does Landscape Link do? 'Cause I'm not familiar with them.
Oh, they're a broker and trade market. So I didn't do too much brokering, but a little bit while I was there. Mostly I was managing the outdoor trade market. So they're like Dinsan and Plantmark, in that, yeah, all the nurseries bring their stock there and sell them, yeah, sell it out, kind of like a plant supermarket. So yeah, I managed the outdoor area, and I made lots and lots of nursery connections in that time.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Is
it
that
was.
where is that where you met Jodie O'Toole? So she's from
Yeah,
Baylor, Jersey
yeah, she
recommended.
worked at Landscape Link too.
All right.
Yeah, yeah, that's where we met. She was working there while she was doing Bay Design, the real, like, doing her design and installation sort of side of things. And yeah, we met there and been in connection ever since. Good friend.
All right. And it was just working with yourself for about a year, you said?
Yeah, it was a solid year. It may have like gone over a little bit. Yeah, and it was a lot. I'm very much I've been conditioned to like job security.
Yep.
And so working for myself was exciting, but also terrifying. And so I would just say yes to absolutely everything, with the, fear that I would run out of work at any given second. And so, yeah, probably worked 6 or 7 days the entire year. Burnt me out big time.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's really a story, especially at the start. Everyone says yes to everything because they get excited about all the work that's coming in, and then you realize that you can't say yes to everything because
Yeah.
you breathe and take and rest.
Yeah, yeah. And you're like, oh, gotta get the money, gotta get the money. What if it runs out? And,
Yeah.
I look at the end of the year, looked at my bank account, and, I'd done pretty good considering it was my first year of, completely self-employed. But yeah, the hours. Oof.
Yeah. If you work it out back to hourly rate, it's not that
Mm.
good.
Yep. And you don't value yourself. I was doing free consultations. I was, yeah, the client, there'd be quite a bit of scope creep. The clients would push things and push things, and didn't have the confidence to say no or to charge when I should have been. I had positioned my sort of the landscaping side of things, the design and the installation, I was aiming for that real mid tier. So people who wanted a nice garden but couldn't afford Bengay and, all the big guys sort of thing. And so I would come in and design them a garden for a relatively decent, affordable price, and even have flexible arrangements where I would just position the plants, teach them how to plant, and let them do it themselves.
Yep.
And quickly discovered that that market isn't very big.
All right.
It's either a lot of people don't want to spend the money, or they are happy to spend the money and have a bunch of money to spend.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was really hard to find that mid-level.
When you were describing the target audience, I thought there'd be a lot in that bracket as well.
I thought there would too, but they were hard to find. I don't know. Yeah.
But yeah, that when I started doing designs, my price was a lot lower than what it is now, and I was getting not the products that I wanted to get. And then when I put
Yeah.
the prices up, the more I put the prices up, the more I get the clients that I wanted to work for.
Yeah, it's got that
Yeah.
prestige.
Yeah. So the more people are going to pay for a design, the more they value what you're actually going to get out of the design as well. So and the
Yeah,
project.
yeah.
So
And
it's
it just, it makes it worth it for you. It's one of the things there's a few things that I rant about when I get going in class, and it's one of the things that I really like: valuing yourself, valuing your time, knowing what you're worth. Even if you are studying, whether they're doing their apprenticeship or, I've had some foreign horticulture students and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, I would only charge like, I don't know, $20 an hour. And I'm like, $20 an hour. What are you doing? What are you
yeah. And
doing?
even just working out hourly rate, if you're going to charge a quote to do a design, you even can't think of it at an hourly rate either, because there's a lot more involved, and like you said, your value of knowing what to do and how to do it shouldn't just be put down to an hourly rate.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many hours that have gone into the building all that knowledge and do all that sort of stuff that, yeah, you can't just be like slap a little, thing on that and off we go. I've got to get my foot in the door.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard though because a lot of people who have got big names, they also started like that. I've spoken with Dan Herald, and I think he started doing designs for free at the start as well. So
Yeah.
it's
Everyone does it, but I don't know. Sometimes there's some clients where you're like, I'll do it, I'll do it cheaper, I'll do it free or whatever. But if you roll up to a job in Toorak and they've got some gorgeous mansion and all that sort of thing and doing a free consultation,
yeah. Because also they're not going to take you seriously or appreciate, I think you're going to come up with any value. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, knowing your clients, knowing where you can, put a little bit of a markup on some stuff and things like that. Yeah, like even putting markup on plants. That's how a lot of landscapers and gardeners will make a bit of extra money.
yeah.
And I say that to my class, and my students are like, "Do what? Like you put markup on your materials? Like that? Oh my God!" And I'm like, yeah.
That's the easiest way to do it too.
Yeah, yeah. Unless they ask for the invoice.
Yeah. And then it's telling us none of their business. Yeah. So after working for yourself for about a year and change, what was the next step then?
Then I went and with botanics. So I had already been contracting for botanics. I had spent my time, or some of my time at Landscape Link, getting to know Carl and Paul pretty well. And when they had a position open, they were like waiting for my resume. But that was exactly at the same time that I was making the decision to go and work for myself. And so, yeah, I was just doing a bit of casual work for them, contracting, that sort of thing, where they needed help. And, if I had a spare day. And then Carl was like, why don't you come on part-time? And I'm like, okay, I'll come on part-time. Slowly. And then eventually it was like, do you just want a job? And I'm like, yeah, give me a job. So, yeah, and I was there for 6 years pretty much.
And what were you doing there?
So I started off just nursery hand, on the production line doing potting, pruning, all the things, weeding, everything that you've got to do to grow a tree. And over the 6 years progressed up. And by the time, before I left, I was managing the carom site. I had a few staff under me, and yeah, I had moved move from the day-to-day growing, although I did try and get out there and do as much of that as I could because I really do love growing. But yeah, had definitely gone more into, like the strategic stuff and managing staff and, culture and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, so it's almost a bit less horticulture. It's more HR.
There was definitely an element of HR. Yeah. But you gotta have that horticulture knowledge at least because you gotta be able to schedule, this needs pruning at this time so that it's ready for this and getting all your orders. There's a lot of logistics involved with your dispatching and all that sort of stuff. We were Myrtle Rust accredited, so I did all the Myrtle Rust stuff, making sure that nursery was free of Myrtle Rust, and we were spraying everything that needed to be sprayed and doing all that checking and all the, background compliance and all that sort of thing. So yeah.
Right. So what does that get you? Does that mean there's certain other nurseries will only buy certain plants from a
Yeah,
Myrtle Rust accredited nursery?
yeah. So if interstate at the time, if we were selling to another Myrtle Rust accredited nursery, we had to do like all the paperwork and spraying and stuff like that. But I believe it's changed since I was there doing it. But it's interstate mostly. So to send any Myrtaceae stock to South Australia, you have to be a Myrtle Rust accredited nursery from Victoria. And so, yeah, everything has to be monitored and treated and come with all the paperwork and all that sort of stuff because we don't want it spreading into South Australia.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
And then, yeah, there's certain things other states have that we don't as well. So I assume it goes both ways.
yeah, yeah, there's a whole range of, biosecurity things out there that's back and forth and all that sort of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, if we were getting stock down from New South Wales and Queensland, then we would get a Myrtle Rust certificate. But yeah, you don't even consider trying to send stuff to WA. That's like just a whole a whole different thing. And Tassie's pretty tough on their biosecurity as well, all for good reason. Like it's very
Yeah.
important. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you want to send container stock around the country, then yeah, there's a lot of checks and balances and a lot of stuff to keep an eye on.
So is that what Tasmanian certified means? Does that mean they can send to a Tasmanian nursery? Or is, I've seen that
I
on
don't know.
Evergreen Connect on some plants.
Oh yeah, maybe, yeah, probably. Yeah, Tassie have got restrictions on the container size that you're allowed to send down there, as well as the different things that you can spray for. I remember at Landscape Link we could send stuff to Tasmania, so we would get a lot of stuff in and treat it all and send it down there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so much more involved than what the common person would think in terms of a
yeah,
sale nursery.
yeah. There is a lot involved in growing, and that's kind of why it's amazing that plants are as affordable as they are.
That was my first reaction as well when I saw that wholesale nursery. I thought, I can't believe they're so cheap when you see what they're worth in a retail nursery.
Yeah. Well, retail have got their own, bunch of overheads to be concerned about
Yeah.
that they've got to cover. I don't know how many times I had people come in and people from the industry, not just, randoms off the street, come in and be like, oh, I'll take one of those trees and 40 centimeter tree, 1.8 high, and they're like, oh, I'll give you $20 for it. Like $20. That's been on the ground for at least 9 months.
Yeah.
Like we've come along and we've been pruning it and it's had fertilizer and it's water and we've moved it around. Like you touch the plant so many times and it's unavoidable. Especially when you're talking about trees. Like obviously if you're talking about a 140 ml pot, it's a much faster turnaround. But yeah, like oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like when I first saw the price of plants at I think it was Plant Mark was the first time I saw the wholesale prices. I was just blown away at how the actual growers can make money off it. Because I'm making all I'm doing is buying it and putting it in the ground, and I'm making more money than what the person is who started it.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of growers aren't making money off it. It's quite an exercise, and the industry is getting better at this. But I remember back when I started out, the idea of actually breaking down how much money you were putting into that individual pot, like how much fertilizer, water, media, the pot itself, the plant you had to, unless you're propagating yourself, you had to buy that plant into pot, the time, there's so many different things that have gone into it. And even just the ground that it's sitting on, if you don't own the land, then you're paying for that land. You have to maintain that land, the pest and disease control and weed control, and then you're sending it out for $3.50. So I think a lot of growers, they sort of pick a price that seem to fit with what everyone else is, charging, because you have to stay competitive. Can't be too expensive, and go with that and just hope that your turnover is consistent enough that you don't run out of money.
Yeah, that's insane. And then the landscaper comes along and spends 15 minutes with the plant and makes the same amount of money.
Yeah.
Wild. So after, so what was the catalyst behind leaving botanics?
That was when I was moving on to teaching.
All right.
Yeah, so I had been going to MIFGS every year and bumping into two of my trainers, Mike Calloway and Frank Somerville, every year. And they would say to me every year, like, you're going to go get your TAE? When are you going to get qualified? When are you going to come and teach? And I'd be like, oh, I don't know if it's me. I don't know. Like, not ready, all that sort of thing. And then, one day, having moved on to that sort of management and staff training sort of role at Botanics, I had a couple of my staff that had started an apprenticeship and were doing on the job training, and so I had taken on training them, and it sort of became the highlight of my week. I loved it. It was great fun. I loved, even though I, had already been training them in an informal kind of way so that they could do the job. Yeah, actually sitting down and being like, all right, let's talk about plant hormones and all this sort of thing. It was like, oh, a little bit more than just what they need to do the job. It was great. I felt ready. So I went and got qualified, and yeah.
So what was involved in getting qualified to do it?
Well, you have to have industry experience, and you have to have, you either industry experience or hold the qualifications that you want to teach. If you have both, that is preferable. And then you need to go and get a minimum of your certificate 4 in TAE. There's a range of different ways you can do that. You can do it online. You can go and do it, it can take a year. It can take longer. You can go and do it in an intensive. So like in 2 weeks, essentially, just get it done. I was still working at Botanics, and so I was doing it every Saturday. So it took about 6 months with holidays in there. So yeah, working 5 days a week and then going and studying at the Monash campus every Saturday, doing a whole lot of homework, and it's a completely different world.
And where was it that you started teaching?
I went straight to Swinburne.
Yeah.
So they had been hassling me about, when I was going to teach. And so I called them up and went, I can teach now. Give me a job.
And they weren't like that first person when you moved to Melbourne that said, oh, no, we don't have the job for you anymore.
Well, no, luckily, I kind of gave them a heads up that I was studying and,
Yep.
it was in the pipeline. And I think while I studied, all my trainers were on management's back and being like, we need more teachers. There is a teacher shortage across most trades, but definitely in horticulture. And so they're always needing teachers. So yeah, it was just enough prompting over that 6-month period that when I was ready, it was like, okay, let's go. We've got units for you. Can you teach this? Mm-hmm. Off I went.
How was the first class? Were you freaking out?
Yeah, it was terrifying. Yeah, I had been told when I started that I would be co-teaching, which is pretty normal when you're a brand new teacher.
Yep.
And I went, okay, yep, excellent. And I think it was the first class that I was in front of. I was with my other trainers who I was going to be co-teaching with. And they went, okay, we've got 2 groups. So it was soils and nutrients. So 2 units over one day. So we'll do like a morning and afternoon session. And we had the horticulture 3 students and the parks and gardens students all in the sort of group together. And the teacher who normally does the parks and gardens apprentices said, "Hort students, this is Bec. She'll be taking you for this unit from next week." And I went, okay, yep, sure. Yep, I sure will.
Did it take long to get used to it?
I don't think so. In hindsight, I think it was all right. There were definitely some pretty rough classes in there. You could probably find some of my Cert 3 students in those early days that are like, yeah, but it was kind of just sink or swim, I guess. I mean, Swinburne had a lot of resources there for me to draw from, and they were a really supportive team, which was invaluable. But a month into being there, Swinburne stood down all the teachers that were participating in industrial actions, and I hadn't joined the union, and so I was pretty much on my own for, I think it was 6 weeks. No, because my classes kept running, but no one else's did.
All right.
Yeah.
When
So
was that? How long ago was that?
that was like a month after I had started.
And how long ago?
So what year is it? So it would have been not last year, but the year before
All
in
right.
semester 2. Yeah.
Is that when they sort of start the proceedings to close down not long after that?
I mean, we feel like they were probably in the actions for quite some time before we had any inclination that was happening. The industrial action stand down was TAFE wide. It wasn't just horticulture.
Okay.
So yeah, it was every department. But yeah, I'm really bad with timelines and dates and things. But yeah, term 1 last year is when they sort of gave us the news that they would be that they was proposing to shut down the department, and then yeah, there was a, oh, I can't remember, 6 or 8 week long consultation period, and then yeah, then it happened, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting word, use of the word consultation, though, from what I understand.
It's
Yes.
one of those really malleable, flexible terms,
Yeah. So and so they're not, like, I saw they were going to be finishing out people who started. Was that right? Or people were through halfway through a 2-year course were going to finish that, or was that just
Yeah,
different at different
it
campuses?
varied. So they're still teaching this year. So through 2023, they taught out as many as they could. So that was landscape apprentices, Hort Cert 3, Hort and a landscape Cert 2, Hort diploma, landscape design, and parks and gardens. So everyone else except for nursery, the nursery operations in there as well. So every other unit was being delivered somewhere else. And so they were teaching out the year with a few reductions, early on. And so if a student were able to finish in 2023, then they could stay at Swinburne and complete their studies. They had the option of transferring to another RTO if they wanted to, and Swinburne would help facilitate that. And if they couldn't complete the study in those units in 2023, then they would be transitioned to another RTO for 2024 to continue completion. And nursery operations are still at Swinburne. So there's nursery apprentices there 1 day a week throughout the rest of this year, maybe even some into next year. It all depends if another RTO picks it up.
Yeah, right.
The problem is Swinburne are pretty much the only people that offer it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big shame because like everyone always talks about the people who went to Burnley and were studying there, and then they gradually did less and less, and now it's nowhere near what it used to be like, and that's the same things happening at Swinburne. So, because I was talking with Lucy Wilcox, who's from London, and she was talking about how many different options there are to study design and
Mm,
all sorts of horticulture in the UK, and it's like
yeah.
it's the opposite in Australia. There's get less and less things to study.
It's concerning. My like Hort Cert 3, I mean, at the moment it's a free course. So, numbers are pretty strong at most RTOs from what I can tell, because they need more people in the industry. But coming at it from a nursery operations perspective, if more RTOs don't deliver it, then the employers are just going to go to on the job training. And if you have a good employer that invests in your training, then on the job's not, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. You do miss out on, collaboration
Mm.
with different trainers and other people in your classroom and the social aspects. And like, I still talk to people I went to TAFE with, and that was over a decade ago.
Yeah.
So you miss out on those aspects. But if you've got a good employer who's going to invest in your training properly, then, you'll still get a good education, a good varied education. But if you have a not so good employer that's just like, just get your ticket, do your apprenticeship, then you're not going to have that diversity. If you're not a propagation nursery, when you do your propagation unit, they're going to skim over it. You're not going to learn all the things that you should be learning. And so you might end up with your qualification at the end. But if you take that qualification to try and get a job somewhere else, you don't actually have the knowledge. You know how to work at that one place, but it's not transferable.
Yeah.
And so that's my real fear for the industry, that we're just going to end up with a bunch of people with almost meaningless qualifications who are extremely specialized at one employer and are going to get stuck at that employer.
Yeah. And that's the thing when there's so many different little pockets involved within one industry, like in the nursery nurseries.
Yeah.
There's some do production and some don't. Some are more concerned about pest and disease than others as well. So and identification of them, which is pretty critical.
Yeah. And even just the different types of nurseries, your propagation is completely different to tree growing. And then you've got smaller container nurseries in there. Some growers specialize to the point where they only grow, 2 or 3 different genus or something like that. It's like extremely specialized. If you send those apprentices to TAFE, then they're going to get exposed to everything. But if you don't, they're just going to have that knowledge base.
Yeah, and there's a lot of benefits for the student to go to TAFE as well, because
Huge.
like if they work at a retail nursery, or then they're going to learn about production. They might realize that that's what they love doing. Like I certainly loved doing propagation when I was studying horticulture. So
it's everyone's favorite unit.
yeah, it's just I couldn't talk enough about how fascinating it is and how satisfying. So so whereas people who they learn on the job just because their employer doesn't want to lose them for a day a week, that's they're not going to know about that.
Or have nowhere to send them.
Yeah.
The employer might want to send them, want to actually send them to a TAFE, but if no TAFEs are delivering it, then, or if it's a TAFE that's too far away, if Melbourne Poly are offering it, that's great if you're up that way. But if you're down on the peninsula, like so many growers are, or even in the Dandenongs, like so many growers are, that's a long way to get out to Fairfield or Epping. Especially when you're talking about apprentices. Some of them are 16. Were they meant to catch the train? It might not be tenable.
How did you go? Do you have to do much lesson planning and the sort of paperwork side of the learning? And have you?
That's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's what term breaks are for. TAFE teachers are not, for anyone that's considering being a TAFE teacher, it is not like high school teachers. We do not get the term breaks off. You get 4 weeks annual leave. So term breaks are all about building up your resources and writing assessments and doing validations and all that sort of thing. So,
I've mentioned it a couple of times, but I know a landscape architect who went to TAFE to teach landscape design, and he couldn't stand all the stuff he had to do.
The compliance.
Tick all the boxes. Compliance.
Yeah, look, it is a really big aspect of it, but it's also really important. Lack of compliance is what led to all those shoddy RTOs signing up dead people and stuff like that. Like, compliance it's dull. It's dull and monotonous, but it's really important. It's what makes qualifications mean something. If you got a piece of paper that from an RTO that doesn't do their compliance or anything, are you really qualified, or did you just get all the boxes ticked?
Yeah.
So
and you're working at Chisolm now, is that correct? You went there after Swinburne?
Yeah, so I did a very brief stint at Melbourne Poly, discovered that it's a really long drive. It's a lovely TAFE, but it's very far from where I live. And so, yeah, I happened to sort of coincide with Chisholm offering some positions. So, yeah, I have picked that up. They're 0.8 now, which is perfect. 4 days a week is lovely. I'm not interested in 5 days a week anymore. And I started like semester 2. So going into my first full year. And yeah, it's great. It's a good TAFE to work at. We're really working on building and developing the courses and the campuses and all that sort of thing. And it's a really supportive management team, and all the teachers are great. And yeah.
Nice. And at either one, have you spoken to any TAFE teachers who have been there for a long time about how things have changed over the years?
Yeah, I mean, at Swinburne especially, I was working with Mike Calloway, who had been teaching well, he started before it was Swinburne, so he'd been there for 35 years. So yeah, definitely can track. And I think the compliance is one of the big things. There's a lot more importance put on that now. And you kind of need to be able to do everything. So teachers are expected to write assessments and to develop resources. You don't just walk into the room and start talking. And I think they're probably the main changes. The focus on what sorts of courses are available has probably shifted a little bit, and probably even like the demographics of who are taking on those courses. Definitely making horticulture free has changed the sort of who's interested and who's going to do it. COVID had a huge impact on who wants to train. I mean, I wasn't teaching before that, but I was pretty active in the industry, going to different things. And yeah, there's a huge increase in people that realised over the shutdowns, and that it's actually quite nice working with plants, and maybe sitting in the office for 5 days a week and doing, crazy big hours isn't so great.
Yeah.
It's really nice getting your hands in the soil. And
Yeah, it'd be
so,
fascinating to see what the numbers are like with people who are studying pre-2020 to as opposed to now, because there does seem to be a lot
yeah,
of interest in it.
yeah, there definitely is increased interest, and that has been, yeah, supported by making Hort Cert 3 free. I can almost guarantee that every Hort class that I do, there is at least one person in there that wants to get into medical marijuana as well. So that industry is definitely something that is interesting people, and yeah, they want to get into that.
Yeah, right. So is it sort of is it is it legal yet in Australia to grow it?
There are some businesses that are growing it, but it's not huge. It is still pretty locked down as to who is allowed to do it and who isn't allowed to do it.
Yeah.
But it's going to be an industry that continues to grow, I reckon. I mean, I haven't gone in and seen the stats. I'm sure NGIV could probably provide some decent information on that. Certainly some agriculture sort of institutes could. But yeah, I know a lot of people who have their cards.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a growing industry. And it's people who want to get into the actual legitimate growing
Yeah.
in the farms. Yeah.
Yeah, because I imagine like if there's more and more countries where it's becoming legalized, so
Mm.
it's only a matter of time. So it's a smart thing to do to be, experienced in it as much as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Having that horticulture background and being able to come in and go, yep, I understand all of these, plant physiology. I understand pruning. I understand all these things. Surely give you an advantage over
Yeah.
someone who's just like, I love weed.
There's also plenty of those people in the courses as well.
I would imagine they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Every trade, I'm sure, has them.
Yeah. Yeah, I studied horticulture before I got into landscaping, so it would have been probably 20 years ago. And there was a couple in that class who were that was their main reason for being there, I think.
Yeah.
And you're also the president of Encouraging Women in Horticulture. So when did
Yep.
you first join them?
I've been with EWHA for a few years now. This is my second year as president. I was secretary for a year, and I joined a little bit before that on the committee. I was familiar with the organisation before that, but not active, and I don't think I was a member until pretty much soon as I joined the committee. But yeah, it's definitely something that I'm very passionate about. They're a great organisation. Anyone can join. and anyone can come to our events. Don't feel like we're locking anyone out. We just use our funds to encourage women.
Yep.
So
And
yeah.
so what sort of events do you do?
So we usually hold 8 to 9 events a year. We do a mix of nursery tours, garden tours, guest speakers. We try and do a webinar in there. Sometimes it's very plant focused, and other times it's like kind of allied. Like we've done some bird and bees, like I did a beekeeping talk and stuff like that. So yeah, it's not always entirely horticulture, but it can be sort of allied sort of stuff. Yeah, the nursery tours, the garden tours are like the bread and butter. They're the ones that we do year after year. We've been to some really lovely gardens, both ones that are available to the public to go, but we get like a tour, or we've been to some private gardens. We've been to retail nurseries. We go to a lot of wholesale nurseries. A lot of wholesalers are really kind to open up their doors and give us a tour and show us the behind the scenes. And it's really good for people who are in the industry to get out and see different things. But it's also like we're not just industry based. So we've got a lot of hobby gardeners and enthusiasts and stuff like that who wouldn't necessarily be going to NGIV, tree and shrubbies events and all that sort of thing. So it's a good opportunity for them to get into industry and see what's happening where they wouldn't normally have that access.
Mm. I spoke with Stacey Swettenham a couple of weeks ago. She's a landscaper, and she was talking about trying to get more women into the construction side of things as well. And the best way to do it is because a lot of girls at school don't know that pathway
Yeah,
exists. So is that something you guys do as well?
I mean, we try. We're a pretty small committee, so our time and resources are limited. A lot of what we do is trying to provide access and networking through the events. Some of our events are literally just go to a cafe and talk, and some of our like better.
Yep.
People love them. They're like, we love this talking. I'm like, okay. But also all the other things. But we try to actively support members to get in and do other things. I've been to a few things, not necessarily with NGI. Sorry, I went with NGIV to like some girls in trade sort of stuff, not necessarily supporting EWHA, but I was supported by EWHA, and I have examples to show and all that sort of thing through my connections in that group. So yeah, and just trying to encourage people. We have a bit of a mentoring sort of aspect where if someone asks questions, we can link them up with members. We have scholarship and grants that we do every year. So we have a $1,000 scholarship for anyone studying horticulture, or a woman studying horticulture, or allied, design, or it doesn't have to be straight horticulture. We also have a small business grant and an apprenticeship grant that we do every year. The apprenticeship grant can be hard for us to get applicants for because there's no horticulture apprenticeship. Most of the apprenticeships would be in landscape construction. And so, there are very few women enrolled in that. It's something that we'd like to see change and get more people enrolling. And the RTOs want that as well. We want to try and encourage diversity in the industries. But it's rough. It is a very male-dominated sector. And it's also at that age, like at the apprenticeship age, it's a certain type of male that's interested in it. And just seeing my apprenticeships, the classes that I've had, it's they don't pick on the girls or anything, but they're different. It's hard to fit in and have that social aspect when you've got a group of 15 or 20 lads.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can only imagine how intimidating it would be, especially for a girl who's just left school wanting to get into horticulture.
Yeah,
And
really
starting with
young.
and starting with a bunch of buffoons who are just mucking around and because like even I was a pretty quiet guy when I was doing my studying, and I was intimidated by people in the class. So
Yeah. There definitely is that element. I mean, every class, regardless of the intake of the course that they're doing, you've always got your loud ones, and you've always got your quiet ones, and you've got your ones who always turn up late, and there's everything is covered across all of them. But yeah, there's landscape apprentices are definitely a way of thinking.
And was Encouraging Women in Horticulture involved in the all-female garden that was designed and built at Memphis last year?
We helped in that we sort of sent out a sort of a call for anyone that wanted to volunteer or anything like that. So yeah, we definitely tried to help out a little, but we weren't heavily involved. Emma, who did that garden, has since become, more active with our organisation, and we're sort of doing a little bit more and all that sort of thing. But it was later down the line of the garden being built that we were like, ooh.
Yeah.
So
do you know something
yeah,
like that this year?
not that I'm aware of. No one's reached out or anything like that. I think that garden was built with the Open Garden Victoria grant. So yeah, I guess it all depends what gardens are going in and who's driving them and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But if anyone's listening and they do need a hand,
Yeah.
we are happy to put the call out.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great idea because there's plenty of women designing and constructing gardens there. So yeah, it's a good place for that.
We're not all about all female all the time or anything like that. We're all going to coexist. We'll work together. So yeah, we just want to support women getting in there and doing what they want to do in any aspect. There's a lot of female support designers out there and architects, which is excellent. But yeah, that landscape construction sort of side.
What's
I
the
mean,
nursery like?
in nursery, it's good and it's getting better up to a point. So there's a lot of women that work in nurseries, but once you get to the really like nursery owners, it becomes very male again. But that's slowly changing. But yeah, there's just, management. I mean, I imagine this is across every industry, every single work sector, that it's harder for women to get into management with a lot of the family pressures. So, it doesn't apply to every woman, but there definitely is, that sort of, I don't want to say burden, but a lot of the family child rearing and family responsibilities land on the woman.
Yep.
And if you're going to really be getting into higher management roles and things like that, it can be really difficult.
Yeah. There's a few people I've spoken to, particularly designers, who they might have they moved their way up into management, not within horticulture, but wherever they were working. And then when they went and had kids and they got back, then they entered the horticulture industry, like in a part-time to start with, and then grew from there. So there's more than one way, more than one path, but yeah, it makes sense.
Oh, definitely. I mean, just nursery ownership is just difficult for anyone. Like,
yeah,
having a nursery means you need land, and land is extremely expensive. So, like, unless you have amazing capital or amazing credit ratings, or you're inheriting land, or even better, inheriting a nursery, it can be really hard to start out and build up. So yeah, there's a lot of barriers there for anyone.
Yeah. Last question for you is, who do you think would be a good guest to have on the podcast?
I've got two for you.
Perfect.
So highly recommend getting Emma Hurd on. Emma is also from EWHA. She was president before I was. She is a landscape architect and has her own business as well as doing work with other firms. So Little Green Landscapes. And Sean Leeming from Portrait Landscapes is a colleague of mine at Chisolm, but yeah, does the more landscape construction side. So yeah.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story. I was really looking forward to having a chat with you because Jodie talked you up. So
yeah, she did.
thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. It was really good.